She has a scar identical to the Mafia boss's dead wife. He grabbed her arm. Who are you really? Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. This one might leave you questioning everything you think you know. Sarah was just an ordinary woman, living an ordinary life, or so she thought. It all started on a late afternoon when she noticed something strange while brushing her hair in the bathroom. A scar, barely visible at first, just a faint line running along the side of her neck. She'd never seen it before. It wasn't a fresh scar. It looked old, like it had been there for years. But Sarah had no memory of ever getting a scar like that. She stared at it in confusion, her fingers lightly tracing the line. The sensation was strangely familiar, like she should have recognized it, but she didn't. She had no recollection of how it got there. And that's when it hit her. The scar was identical to the one her mother had described her father's wife having, the one that had been a part of the woman's mysterious death years ago. Sarah's heart began to race. The feeling of dread settled in her chest like a weight. Could this be a coincidence? The scar was too specific, too eerily similar. She couldn't shake the thought. It was as if her body was trying to tell her something her mind wasn't ready to accept. Later that evening, Sarah attended a business gala, a night that she hoped would help take her mind off the strange scar. The event was held in a lavish venue, with glittering chandeliers and perfectly arranged floral arrangements. As she weaved her way through the crowd, Sarah caught sight of a man she hadn't expected to see, a man who seemed to be watching her with intense focus. His sharp gaze sent a chill down her spine, as if he could see right through her. She didn't know him, but his presence felt suffocating. His suit was impeccably tailored, his dark hair slicked back, and his sharp features seemed to belong to someone who commanded respect, someone who could control a room with just a look. The man approached her with slow, deliberate steps, his eyes never leaving hers. His gaze settled on her neck, and his face hardened slightly. He stopped in front of her, and without a word, he grabbed her arm. His grip was firm but not aggressive, just enough to keep her still. "Who are you really?" he asked, his voice deep, tinged with an accent she couldn't quite place. Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. Her mind raced. What did he mean? She was nobody, just a woman at a gala, trying to blend in. But there was something in his tone that suggested he knew something she didn't. His eyes held a mixture of curiosity and something darker. He wasn't asking for her name. No, it was something more personal. Something about her that he thought he recognized. Sarah tried to pull away, but his grip tightened ever so slightly. The fear began to bubble up, but she tried to maintain composure. "I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, trying to steady her breath. "I'm just a guest here." The man didn't seem convinced. His eyes flicked to her neck again, and then back to her face. "You look like someone I used to know. Someone who's gone now." His words struck her like a punch to the stomach. What was he implying? She couldn't remember any connection to this man or anyone from his past. But something in the pit of her stomach told her that this was only the beginning of something far more complicated than she was ready for. His hand finally released her arm, but the tension in the air lingered, thick and heavy. He turned to leave, but not before adding, "We'll talk again soon." Sarah stood frozen, her mind reeling. Who was this man? And why did he think she looked like someone from his past? As she tried to regain her composure, Sarah couldn't help but wonder. Could this scar, this strange, unexplained mark on her neck, hold the key to a mystery she wasn't prepared to uncover? The moment his hand released her arm, Sarah felt her legs buckle beneath her. She had been so sure of herself earlier that evening, confidently attending the gala, looking for some distraction from the strange scar that had been tormenting her. But now, after meeting the man with the icy stare and those words that seemed to pull the very air from her lungs, Sarah was filled with dread. Who was he really? Why did he say she looked like someone he used to know? The room around her seemed to spin as she steadied herself, eyes darting to the exit. She needed to get out of there. She wasn't sure what she was running from. Him, the unanswered questions, or the terrifying feeling that she had just stepped into something much bigger than she could handle. As she walked towards the door, she could feel the eyes of the other guests following her every step. The whispers had started, quiet at first, but growing louder as she passed. It wasn't just her. They were watching her because of him. His presence had that effect on people, commanding, authoritative, impossible to ignore. Sarah stepped out into the cool night air, gasping for breath. The city felt different now, somehow distant and cold. She couldn't shake the feeling that this man, this stranger, knew something about her past, and maybe, just maybe, about the scar that had appeared on her neck. The same scar that was identical to the one her mother had described her father's dead wife having. As she walked to her car, Sarah's mind raced. Was it possible that she had somehow been connected to this world she had never known? The world of Mafia, of violence, of dangerous men who commanded everything around them? She thought back to her mother's stories. The tales of a woman who had been married to a powerful Mafia boss. A woman who had died mysteriously under circumstances that were never fully explained. Sarah had always dismissed those stories as just that, stories. But now, as the memory of the man's voice echoed in her ears, she wasn't so sure. She couldn't afford to dismiss it any longer. There had to be a reason why her scar was identical to the one from the dead wife. And there had to be a reason why this Mafia boss had seemed to recognize her. Sarah couldn't stop herself from thinking back to the words. He had said, "Who are you really?" It was more than a question, it was an accusation. As she slid into the driver's seat of her car, she glanced at the rearview mirror. Her reflection seemed different now. She was no longer just Sarah, the girl who had grown up in a small town, worked hard to put herself through college, and had a fairly normal life. No, now she was someone connected to something dark, something dangerous. She drove through the city streets, the cold wind from the night seeping into the car, her thoughts racing. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to get away. Away from the gala, away from the questions, away from the man who had triggered something deep inside her. But the farther she drove, the more she realized she couldn't outrun the truth. Not anymore. The scar, the strange connection to a dead woman, and the Mafia boss who seemed to know more about her than he should. It was all too much. She had to know the truth. She had to know who she really was. The drive seemed endless. The streets were empty, lit only by the dim glow of streetlights. As she pulled into a secluded parking lot, Sarah felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. She knew what she had to do. She had to confront this. She had to find out what had happened to her, and why her past was so closely tied to this dangerous world. Just as she turned off the engine, her phone buzzed in her bag. She pulled it out, expecting another message from her friend, but instead, it was a notification. A news alert. Mafia boss's wife's mysterious death, unsolved for years. Sarah's blood ran cold. She clicked on the article. The image of the woman on the screen was almost too much to bear. She looked almost identical to Sarah. The same features, the same eyes, the same dark hair. The scar. It was there too, clear as day. The image was accompanied by a headline that made her stomach churn. Authorities still searching for answers in death of Mafia boss's wife. Sarah couldn't breathe. She wasn't sure how much longer she could stand there, staring at the screen. The woman in the photo was her. Or, at least, someone who looked exactly like her. Sarah wasn't sure if she was looking at her own past, or at a ghost from someone else's life. But one thing was clear, she had to find the answers. No matter how dangerous the truth might be, she had no choice but to uncover it. She couldn't run any longer. She wasn't sure where this road would lead, but she was already too far down it to turn back. The days that followed were a blur for Sarah. She couldn't stop thinking about the strange connection between her and the Mafia boss's late wife. The scar, the strange recognition in his eyes, the unsettling news article, all of it weighed heavily on her mind. She had no idea what to make of it. Was she just seeing things? Or was there something deeper going on, something that linked her to a world she had never even known existed? The more she thought about it, the more the pieces seemed to fit, and that terrified her. Sarah decided to take action. She couldn't go on living with this uncertainty. She had to know the truth, no matter what the cost. She began to investigate the mysterious woman from the article, the wife of the Mafia boss who had died years ago. Her name was Isabella Romano, and everything about her life seemed too perfect. A beautiful, wealthy woman, married to one of the most feared men in the city. But as Sarah dug deeper, she found unsettling details. Isabella's death had been labeled an accident, but the details were vague, and no one seemed to have any answers. It didn't take long before Sarah discovered something chilling. There were rumors that Isabella had been involved in something far darker than anyone had ever imagined. Some said she had crossed her husband. Others claimed she had been trying to escape his world. Whatever the truth was, one thing was certain: Isabella's death was shrouded in mystery, and no one had ever truly found out what happened. Sarah couldn't help but feel drawn to the story. It felt like her own life was somehow intertwined with Isabella's, as though they were two pieces of the same puzzle. The more she thought about it, the more she felt like there was a deeper connection, one she had yet to understand. But she wasn't about to sit idly by anymore. The following night, Sarah decided to take a risk. She went to a place she knew she shouldn't, the nightclub owned by the Mafia boss, Romano. It was rumored to be a place where secrets were made and buried, a place where dangerous people gathered. But Sarah wasn't afraid. Not anymore. She had to know the truth, even if it meant stepping into the lion's den. She walked into the club, the neon lights flashing in her eyes, the bass of the music vibrating through her body. The atmosphere was thick with tension, the kind of tension that made every move feel like it mattered. She spotted him almost immediately. Romano, standing in the center of the room, his dark eyes scanning the crowd. His presence was commanding, impossible to ignore. And once his gaze fell on her, Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. He was watching her, studying her like she was the most important thing in the room. His eyes narrowed slightly, and for a moment, it felt like the entire world had paused. Sarah swallowed hard, trying to keep her composure. She wasn't sure why she had come here, or what she expected to happen, but the pull between them was undeniable. She walked toward him, her feet moving almost of their own accord. As she got closer, she could feel the weight of his stare, the intensity of his gaze that seemed to pierce right through her. She stopped just a few feet away, not sure what to say. Dante spoke first. "You've been looking for answers, haven't you?" His voice was low, his accent smooth, like velvet. Sarah's throat went dry. "I don't know what you mean," she managed to say, her voice betraying her nerves. He smirked, the corners of his mouth curling into a dangerous smile. "You think you're just a regular woman, don't you? You think this scar, this connection, is a coincidence?" Sarah took a step back, her heart racing. "How did he know? What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Dante's smile only grew wider. "I want the truth," he said, his voice dark and commanding. "You're not who you think you are, Sarah. And neither was Isabella." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Isabella, his dead wife. The connection was real. She had known it all along, deep down, but hearing him say it aloud made it real in a way she hadn't been ready for. "Who am I?" Sarah asked, her voice shaking. Dante's eyes glinted with something dark and knowing. "You're a part of this world, whether you want to be or not. And you've been running from it your whole life." He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "But it's time you faced the truth. Time you learned what really happened to Isabella. Time you learned about your own past." Sarah felt the ground shift beneath her feet. She had been living in a lie that had been carefully constructed for years. And now, the truth was staring her in the face, ready to unravel everything she thought she knew about herself. The truth was out there, but would she be able to handle it? Or would it destroy her world entirely? The tension in the air was suffocating. Sarah stood there, her heart pounding in her chest as Dante's words echoed in her mind. She was part of this world, whether she wanted to be or not. He had known it all along. He knew what she was running from, and now, she had no choice but to confront it. "What do you mean?" Sarah managed to ask, her voice trembling slightly. Dante's cold gaze softened, just a fraction, but it was enough to make her wonder if there was more to his words than she understood. He took a step closer, his presence overwhelming. "You're not a stranger to all of this, Sarah. I've been watching you. You don't remember, but you were always meant to be part of this world." His voice dropped to a whisper. "You've been running from something you don't even understand." Sarah felt her breath catch. Her legs were shaking, but she stood firm, desperate to make sense of the storm that was swirling around her. "I don't know what you're talking about," she whispered, her throat dry. Dante tilted his head slightly, studying her with an almost eerie intensity. "You think you're just a woman with a scar, right? But that scar is the key, Sarah. It's the link between you and Isabella. And it's the link between you and me." The realization hit Sarah like a wave. Isabella, the woman whose life had been taken, whose scar matched hers. the dead wife of a mafia boss, a woman who had once lived in a world of wealth, power, and danger. Dante's world. But how could she be a part of it? She was nothing. Just a woman, trying to make a life for herself. Or so she thought. What happened to Isabella? Sarah asked, her voice barely audible. Dante's expression hardened, the faintest flicker of pain crossing his face. Isabella was more than just a wife. She was my world. But she was also caught in a game she couldn't win. He paused, letting the words sink in. And when she tried to escape, it cost her everything. Sarah swallowed, her mind racing. You're saying she was trying to escape you? Dante's gaze darkened. I'm saying she was trying to escape this life, this world. But once you're in it, there's no way out. He stepped closer again, his voice low and dangerous. And now, it's your turn to face it, Sarah. You can't run anymore. You never could. Sarah stumbled back, her heart racing. I don't want this. I don't want to be a part of your world, she said, her voice shaking with fear and anger. Dante's eyes flashed with something dark. You don't have a choice. You never did. For a moment, Sarah thought she might collapse under the weight of it all. But she couldn't. She had to know the truth. She had to understand who she really was. She had to find out what was hidden in her past. She had to know what the scar meant, and why it had haunted her for so long. Tell me the truth, she demanded, her voice gaining strength. What is the connection between me and Isabella? What am I supposed to do with all of this? Dante's expression softened just slightly, and for a moment, he looked almost like a man torn between two worlds. The truth is, you're more connected to Isabella than you think. You have the same blood running through your veins. You're her daughter, Sarah. The words hit her like a punch. What? She gasped, stepping back as if the ground had been pulled out from under her. No, that's not possible. I don't know who you think I am, but I'm not her daughter. Dante's eyes locked with hers, intense and unwavering. I know this is hard to believe, but I've been looking for you for years. You were hidden away, kept from me. But I knew. You would come. You always were meant to. Sarah's mind was spinning. Her entire world was crashing down around her. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I'm not her daughter, she said again, her voice breaking. You're wrong. Dante took another step toward her, his voice softening. I'm not wrong, Sarah. You're a part of this family, whether you accept it or not. And now, you have a choice to make. Sarah felt a cold chill run down her spine as she tried to process his words. Could it really be true? Was she really Isabella's daughter? Was this scar the mark of her past, a past she had never known? She wanted to run, to escape, but something in Dante's eyes told her there was nowhere to hide. She was already a part of this world. And now, she had to face it. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Dante's gaze softened, just for a moment, before his tone turned cold again. I want you to step into the world that's waiting for you. I want you to embrace your destiny, Sarah. This is who you are. You can't change it. Sarah's heart was racing. Her hands were shaking. Everything she thought she knew was falling apart, and in its place was something darker, more dangerous. But one thing was clear. She couldn't run anymore. The truth was staring her in the face, and it was far worse than anything she could have imagined. Sarah stood there, frozen, trying to process Dante's words. She was Isabella's daughter. The woman who had died all those years ago, the wife of the feared mafia boss, was her mother. The realization slammed into her like a freight train, leaving her breathless. Her mind raced, but it couldn't keep up with the overwhelming flood of emotions crashing over her. Dante had said it so casually, like it was nothing, but it was everything. She was a part of this world now, whether she wanted to be or not. She couldn't deny it anymore. She was tangled in the web of the Mafia, a legacy she had never asked for, and now she was tied to it in ways she didn't understand. Her hands were shaking as she tried to grasp the enormity of what Dante had just told her. I can't be, she whispered, her voice breaking. You're wrong. Dante's gaze softened for a brief moment, his expression one of pity, almost as if he could feel the weight of the truth he had just laid on her. I wish it were that simple, Sarah. But it's not. I've been looking for you for years. You were hidden away for your own protection. But now the time has come for you to know the truth. For you to take your place. Sarah stumbled back, her legs feeling weak beneath her. She was drowning in confusion, her entire sense of identity unraveling with every passing second. I don't know anything about this world, she said, her voice trembling with fear and disbelief. I don't even know who I am anymore. Dante took a step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. I know it's a lot to process, but you have no choice now. You are my family. You're Isabella's daughter, and that means you are a part of this world, whether you like it or not. This life is in your blood. Sarah shook her head, her thoughts a blur. She had always thought she was just an ordinary woman. A woman with a past she could barely remember. A woman who had worked hard to build a life for herself away from anything dark or dangerous. But now, everything had changed. Her past, the scar on her neck, the connection to Isabella, to Dante. It was all too much to process. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Dante's face remained unreadable, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. I want you to accept your place. You need to step into this world, Sarah. You need to understand what it means to be a Romano. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. She couldn't deny the pull, the strange sense of destiny that was drawing her closer to Dante, to this world she had never wanted to be a part of. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized she had no choice. She was already in too deep. I can't just become a part of this, she protested, her voice weak. I'm not ready. Dante's expression hardened, a flicker of impatience crossing his features. It's not about being ready, Sarah. You don't get to choose. You were born into this life. And now it's time to accept what that means. The weight of his words sank in, and for a moment, Sarah felt utterly powerless. Her life, the one she had built for herself, seemed so far away now. This wasn't the future she had imagined. It wasn't even a future she had wanted. But it was the only future she had now. I can't just erase everything, she whispered. I can't just become what you want me to be. Dante stepped forward, his presence overwhelming. You don't have a choice, Sarah. This is who you are. And this world is dangerous. But it's also powerful. You can either embrace it or be crushed by it. There's no middle ground. The silence that followed hung heavy between them. Sarah could feel the weight of his words pressing down on her chest, suffocating her. What was she supposed to do now? How was she supposed to navigate this world of power and violence? She had never asked for any of this. She had never wanted any of this. And yet, here she was, caught in the storm, with no way out. Dante's voice cut through her thoughts. You need to understand something, Sarah. This world doesn't play by the rules. It never has. And if you're going to survive, you need to be willing to make sacrifices. You need to be willing to do things you never thought you could. The words sent a shiver down her spine. She had always thought of herself as someone who could handle anything. But this was a whole different kind of danger. A danger she didn't know how to survive. I don't know if I can do this, she admitted, her voice barely audible. I don't know if I'm strong enough. Dante's eyes softened, just a fraction. You are stronger than you think, Sarah. You don't have a choice. You'll find your strength in this world, or it will break you. Sarah took a deep breath, the weight of his words sinking in. She had no choice. She was already in too deep, and there was no way out. She had to embrace the truth. She had to find a way to survive in a world that was waiting for her to fall. But even as she made that decision, a part of her couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something far more dangerous than she could ever imagine. The days that followed felt like a blur to Sarah. The weight of Dante's words continued to haunt her, lingering in her mind as she tried to make sense of everything. She had always believed she was in control of her life, carving her own path. But now, everything she had known was shattered. Dante had made it clear. She couldn't escape her past, no matter how hard she tried. She was tied to the Romano family, tied to a legacy that she didn't even remember. The scar on her neck, the same as Isabella's, was no accident. It was the mark of something much larger than she could comprehend. Sarah sat in her small apartment, staring at the empty space in front of her, trying to piece together what to do next. She had come here to escape a world of chaos and violence. But now it was clear, there was no escape. She had to face the truth, no matter how terrifying it was. She was connected to a world that ran on power, fear, and secrets. And the man who held the key to her past, Dante Romano, was not someone she could ignore. He had made sure of that. The next day, Sarah received a call from an unknown number. Her heart skipped a beat as she answered. Sarah, it's Dante, came the voice on the other end. It was cold, commanding as always. I need you to come to the estate. We need to talk. Sarah's stomach twisted. She didn't want to go. She didn't want to be a part of this world. But she knew she had no choice. Dante wasn't someone you said no to. She had to face him, face the reality that she was part of this family, no matter how much she wanted to deny it. She agreed, her voice barely above a whisper, "I'll be there." When she arrived at the Romano estate, she felt the weight of the place, as if it were alive with power and secrets. The tall iron gates loomed ahead, and the massive mansion stood in the distance, its windows dark and imposing. As she walked through the gates, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was entering a world she could never leave. Dante was waiting for her inside. He stood in the grand foyer, his sharp eyes watching her approach. He didn't speak at first, just studied her, as if she were a puzzle he was trying to solve. Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. "You look just like her," Dante said finally, his voice low and almost wistful. "Just like Isabella." Sarah swallowed hard, trying to keep her composure. "I'm not her," she said firmly. But even as she said it, she felt the weight of his gaze, and for a moment, she wasn't so sure anymore. Dante stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "You don't have to be," he said, his voice dark and commanding. "But you have to accept who you are. You are a Romano. You always have been." Sarah's heart raced. She wanted to run, to escape, but she knew it was pointless. The man standing in front of her wasn't just any man. He was a Mafia boss, a man who had the power to destroy everything she knew in an instant. "I didn't ask for this," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "I don't belong here." Dante's expression softened just a fraction, but there was no pity in his eyes, only cold understanding. "None of us asked for this, Sarah," he said quietly. "But it's who we are. You can either accept it, or you can leave and face the consequences." Sarah felt a surge of anger rise within her. "And what happens if I don't choose you? If I choose to walk away?" Dante's lips curled into a small, dangerous smile. "You can't walk away, Sarah. You never could. And if you try, I'll make sure you regret it." The words sent a chill down her spine, but instead of cowering, Sarah stood taller. "I'm not afraid of you," she said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. Dante's smile faded, replaced by an unreadable expression. He studied her for a moment, as if weighing her resolve. "You should be," he said softly. "You have no idea what you're up against." Sarah took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. She had been running from the truth for so long, but now it was staring her in the face. She couldn't run anymore. She had to decide who she was going to be in this world. Would she embrace her past, or would she fight it? And if she fought it, what would it cost her? Dante was right about one thing. There was no middle ground. She had to make a choice, and that choice would define everything that came after. "I don't know what you expect from me," Sarah said finally, her voice steady. "But I won't be your puppet." Dante's expression hardened once again, and for a brief moment, Sarah saw a flicker of something dangerous in his eyes. "No one here is anyone's puppet, Sarah. But we all have our roles to play. You'll learn that soon enough." Sarah didn't know what was coming next, but she knew one thing for certain. She was in deeper than she ever thought possible. And whatever happened next, she would have to face it head on. There was no turning back now. The days that followed were filled with silence, the kind that felt heavy, like the calm before the storm. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was living in a world that wasn't her own. Dante's words kept replaying in her head, and each time they did, the weight of her reality became harder to ignore. She was Isabella's daughter. She was connected to the Romano family, a family that was built on power, violence, and secrecy. Sarah wasn't sure what scared her more, the world Dante wanted her to be a part of, or the truth she had uncovered about her own past. She had thought that by stepping into this life, she could gain answers. But the more she learned, the more she realized that knowledge came with a price. Dante had been watching her for years, had known who she was before she even understood it herself. She had been a part of his world long before she ever walked into it. The thought made her stomach churn. One night, Sarah found herself standing at the edge of the Romano estate, staring at the towering gates. The mansion loomed ahead like a fortress, its dark windows reflecting the moonlight. She had visited the estate many times, but tonight was different. Tonight, she felt the full weight of what it meant to be a Romano. She had never wanted any of this. She had never asked for it. But there was no escaping it now. As Sarah walked toward the entrance, her mind raced. She had spent the past few days trying to process everything that had happened, but the truth was overwhelming. Isabella's death, the scar that matched hers, The Mafia boss who had made her a part of his world. It was all too much. She couldn't deny that there was a strange pull, a sense of belonging that she couldn't shake. But the question remained. Did she want to belong to this world? She couldn't be sure. Sarah, Dante's voice cut through her thoughts, pulling her back to the present. He was standing in the doorway, watching her with a look that was both patient and expectant. She took a deep breath and walked toward him. "I've been waiting for you," he said, his voice steady. "It's time we talked about what comes next." Sarah nodded, her heart racing. "What comes next?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dante stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter the mansion. "You've made your choice. You're a part of this family now. You can either embrace it or fight it, but there's no going back." The words sent a chill down Sarah's spine, but she didn't back away. She couldn't. She had already crossed the line. She had to face whatever was coming. As she entered the grand foyer, Sarah's eyes took in the luxurious surroundings. The marble floors gleamed under the soft light of crystal chandeliers. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and polished wood. It was a world of wealth and power, but it was also a world of danger. "You've been given a choice," Dante continued, his tone colder now. "You can step into your role as a Romano, as Isabella's daughter, or you can walk away and face the consequences." Sarah looked up at him, trying to find her footing in this unfamiliar world. "I don't even know what that means," she said, her voice trembling. "What do you want from me?" Dante's expression softened, just for a moment. "I want you to understand the power that comes with being a Romano. It's not just a name. It's a legacy of loyalty, power, and fear. You need to learn how to navigate it. You need to learn how to survive in this world." Sarah swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words. "Survive?" she repeated. "I don't even know how to begin." Dante stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "That's why I'm here. I'll teach you. But you need to be willing to learn. You need to be willing to do what's necessary." Sarah felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "What's necessary?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Dante's eyes darkened, the warmth in them fading. "Sometimes, you'll have to make choices that are hard. People will challenge you. People will try to take what's yours. And when they do, you have to be ready to fight. You have to be willing to protect this family, no matter the cost." Sarah looked away, struggling to process everything. She had always believed in doing the right thing, in helping others, in being good. But this world didn't work like that. It wasn't about being good. It was about power, survival, and loyalty. And she didn't know if she was ready for that. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered, her voice filled with doubt. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." Dante's expression softened, just a fraction. He reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You are stronger than you think, Sarah. You don't have to be like me. But you do need to learn how to survive in this world. And you need to trust me." Sarah closed her eyes, the weight of his words settling on her chest. She didn't want to trust him, but she had no choice. He was right. She was already a part of this world, whether she liked it or not. She had to find a way to navigate it, to survive it. But as the night stretched on, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The world of the Romani was vast, dangerous, and unpredictable, and she was now at its mercy. Days blurred into nights, and Sarah found herself entangled deeper in the web Dante had woven around her. The mansion, the estate, the overwhelming presence of the Romano family, everything about it felt suffocating. Yet, she couldn't escape it. She couldn't escape him. Dante was everywhere. His eyes were always watching, his words always echoing in her mind. She had come to the estate for answers, but now it felt like she was drowning in more questions than ever before. Every conversation with Dante left her feeling both powerful and powerless at the same time. He was slowly drawing her into his world, and she wasn't sure if she could fight it any longer. The weight of her legacy, her bloodline, was too much to ignore. Sarah had tried to distance herself, tried to keep some semblance of the life she had before she learned the truth, but the harder she tried, the tighter the grip of the Romano name became. It was as if the walls of the estate were closing in around her. It wasn't just the grand mansion that was suffocating, it was everything about the family. The tension, the fear, the sense of power that lingered in the air like a storm waiting to strike. As much as she tried to stay away from it, the more she realized she couldn't. She was already involved, already in too deep. One night, Dante invited her to join him at one of the family's private meetings. She didn't know what to expect, but she couldn't refuse. She wasn't sure if she was ready for what she would learn, but a part of her knew she needed to understand the full extent of her involvement. As she walked into the meeting room, her heart raced. The room was dimly lit, the shadows of men in suits gathered around a large table. The air was thick with the smell of expensive cigars and the weight of power. Dante stood at the head of the table, his presence commanding, as always. He turned as Sarah entered, his eyes locking onto hers, an unreadable expression on his face. "Sit down," he said, his voice low and authoritative. She obeyed without question, taking the seat next to him. The room was silent for a moment, the tension palpable. Sarah could feel the eyes of the men on her, sizing her up, trying to figure out where she fit in their world. Dante didn't introduce her. He didn't need to. They already knew who she was. Isabella's daughter. The bloodline that had been hidden for so long. The room shifted slightly, a few murmurs of recognition passing through the men. Sarah felt a mix of pride and dread. This was her world now, whether she liked it or not. As the meeting began, Dante spoke of business, of deals being made, and of rivals to be eliminated. Sarah sat quietly, observing. She had never seen power like this before. The way the men spoke, the way they moved with an air of untouchability, it was as if they ruled the world with nothing but a glance. The sense of danger was ever present, but so was the allure. Dante's voice broke through her thoughts. "Sarah," he said, drawing her attention, "it's time for you to understand what it means to be a Romano. This is how we operate. This is how the world works. You can either embrace it, or you can fight it. But you can't change it." His words hit her like a punch to the gut. She had always been the kind of person to fight for what was right, to believe in doing things the right way. But this world wasn't about that. It wasn't about right and wrong. It was about power, survival, and loyalty. And Sarah had to decide where she stood. As the meeting went on, Sarah's mind raced. She was learning more than she wanted to. She was learning that there was no escaping this life, no matter how hard she tried. Dante's words echoed in her ears. "You are a Romano, and that means you are a part of this world. This is who you are. You need to learn to accept that." Sarah's hands clenched into fists, her nails digging into her palms. She had been trying so hard to fight this world, to deny it, to convince herself that she could live without it. But the truth was undeniable. She was part of it, and there was no turning back. Later that night, Sarah stood alone in her room, staring at the reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at her wasn't the same person who had walked into the Romano estate days ago. She was different now, marked by a past she couldn't escape, a future she couldn't avoid. The scar on her neck seemed to glow in the dim light, a constant reminder of who she was and where she came from. It was a part of her now, just like the Romano name. She wasn't sure if she was ready for what came next, but she knew one thing for sure. There was no turning back. This world was hers now, for better or worse. And she would have to learn to survive in it, or it would destroy her. The next morning, Sarah woke with a sense of resolve. She was done running from the truth. She had to accept it, face it, and figure out how to survive in a world that had already claimed her. She was a Romano, and that meant she had a place at the table. Whether she liked it or not, she was a part of this life. The question was, could she learn to live with it? The days after Sarah's revelation as a Romano were a blur. She tried to maintain some sense of normalcy, but it felt like the walls were closing in on her. Each step she took deeper into Dante's world made her feel more trapped, more uncertain about the future. Every time she looked in the mirror, the scar on her neck seemed to stare back at her, a permanent reminder that she couldn't escape who she was. The mansion, the estate, it all felt suffocating now. Sarah had never been one to back down from a challenge, but this wasn't just any challenge. This was her life, her identity, and it was being rewritten in ways she wasn't sure she could control. But as much as she wanted to ignore it, she knew one thing. The Romano family wasn't a world she could just walk away from. Dante had made that clear. And now, he was giving her a taste of what it meant to be a Romano. "Come with me," Dante had said the night before, his voice cold and commanding. "It's time you see what it means to be part of this family." Sarah hadn't been given a choice. She had been summoned, and now, she had to follow. The next morning, Dante picked her up from the mansion. His black car glided through the streets like it was made for power. Sarah sat in the passenger seat, the silence between them thick with unspoken words. She could feel the tension building. could sense the weight of everything that was happening. She was no longer just a woman from the outside. She was part of something much bigger. As they drove through the city, Sarah couldn't help but notice how everything seemed different. The city that she had known for years now felt foreign, like a place where secrets hid behind every corner. They arrived at a large building, one Sarah had never seen before. It was a fortress, imposing and unwelcoming, a place that radiated power and danger. "This is where the real decisions are made," Dante said, his voice low. "This is where you'll learn how to navigate the world you're now a part of." Sarah's stomach twisted with uncertainty as she followed Dante inside. The air was thick with the scent of cigar smoke and the low hum of business deals being made in the shadows. The men in suits, the guarded looks, the whispers, everything about this world screamed danger. But it was her world now. The doors opened to a large room, dimly lit, with a long table at the center. Around it sat men with cold eyes and sharp suits, their expressions unreadable. Dante nodded to a few of them, and Sarah could feel the eyes of the room on her. She wasn't just a guest anymore. She was being watched, judged. This was her introduction to the power, the ruthlessness, the cold calculations that governed this world. Dante gestured for Sarah to sit. She hesitated for a moment before taking a seat at the table, her heart racing. The silence stretched on, thick with anticipation. The men at the table were silent, waiting for Dante to speak. "This is Sarah," Dante said, his voice cutting through the tension. "She's now part of this family, and she needs to understand what that means." One of the men, an older man with a scar running down his cheek, looked Sarah over before speaking. "Does she know what she's getting into?" he asked, his voice rough. Dante's eyes darkened. "She'll learn," he replied simply. The man nodded, but Sarah could see the doubt in his eyes. He wasn't sure she was ready. And honestly, neither was she. The Romani family doesn't operate on the same rules as the rest of the world, Dante continued, his voice hardening. "Here, loyalty is everything. Betrayal? It's punishable by death. We deal in power, in control. And when you're part of this family, you're expected to uphold that power. No exceptions." Sarah's mind raced as she absorbed his words. Loyalty, betrayal, power, control. This was a world where the stakes were high, and the consequences for failure were deadly. "You'll be tested," Dante said, his eyes never leaving hers. "And you will either rise to the challenge, or you will fall." Sarah swallowed hard, trying to steady herself. She had always prided herself on being strong, on being able to handle anything. But this world? This was different. This was dangerous. And she wasn't sure if she was prepared for it. But there was no turning back now. She had already stepped into this world, and now she had to navigate it, whether she liked it or not. Dante turned to the men around the table, signaling the start of the meeting. Sarah sat quietly, trying to absorb everything happening around her. The discussions that followed were businesslike, filled with talk of territories, deals, and enemies. It was a language Sarah didn't understand, but she could feel the weight of every decision, the impact of every word. The men spoke in hushed tones, their voices steady and calculated. It was a world built on secrecy and power, and Sarah was now a part of it. She could feel it, the eyes that were on her, the scrutiny. She had to prove herself. She had to prove she was worthy of being a Romano. The meeting dragged on, and Sarah's mind began to numb with the constant barrage of information. But one thing was clear. This world wasn't for the faint of heart. It was a world where survival was all that mattered. And if Sarah was going to survive, she had to learn how to play the game. The game of power, loyalty, and betrayal. And she had no idea if she was ready to play it. Sarah walked through the Romano estate's cold, empty hallways, her mind racing with what she had just witnessed. The meeting, the men, the power that filled the room, it was all too much. Her heart pounded, the weight of everything finally hitting her. This wasn't the life she had imagined. This wasn't the life she had chosen. But this was her reality now, and there was no escaping it. Dante's words kept echoing in her head. "You are a Romano. You are a part of this world." She didn't feel like a part of this world. She didn't know how she could possibly fit into this dangerous, dark world where survival was the only rule. She had never thought of herself as someone who could be powerful, ruthless, but now she realized she didn't have a choice. She had to learn how to survive. She had to learn how to fight for herself. The scar on her neck burned as if reminding her of her place in this family, in This world. She wasn't just anyone. She was the daughter of Isabella Romano, the late wife of the Mafia boss, and that meant everything. It meant she was connected to a legacy built on power, fear, and loyalty. But what did it mean for her? What was her role? As she turned the corner, she nearly collided with a tall man who stood in the doorway. "Miss Romano," he said with a slight bow, his tone respectful yet cold. It was one of Dante's men. Sarah hadn't learned all their names yet, but she knew the way they looked at her. They didn't see her as the woman she thought she was. They saw her as a piece of the family, a symbol of loyalty, power, and perhaps even revenge. "Dante is waiting for you in the study," the man said, stepping aside to let her pass. Sarah nodded and walked past him, her footsteps echoing in the vast hallway. The study was at the far end of the estate, a room she had only seen in passing during her brief visits. It was dark, lined with shelves of books, the rich scent of leather and old paper filling the air. Dante sat behind a large desk, his silhouette barely visible in the dim light. He looked up as she entered, his expression unreadable. "Sit," he said, his voice steady and calm. Sarah hesitated for a moment before sitting across from him, her eyes never leaving his. "I don't know what you expect from me," she said, her voice laced with frustration. "I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't ask to be a Romano. I didn't ask for this life." Dante leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him as he regarded her. "I never asked for any of it either, Sarah. But that doesn't change the reality we live in." His eyes locked onto hers. "You are part of this family. Whether you like it or not, you are tied to it. You can't walk away from that. And if you try, you'll only make things worse." Sarah's chest tightened. She didn't want to be part of this family. She didn't want the danger, the fear, the constant threat that came with being a Romano. She had never imagined a life like this. She had always thought she could escape. But now she knew better. There was no escaping. "What do you want from me?" she asked again, her voice breaking this time. Dante's gaze softened, but there was still an edge to his tone. "I want you to learn," he said. "I want you to understand what it means to be a Romano. I want you to understand that loyalty comes with a price." He leaned forward, his gaze intense. "I've been watching you, Sarah. I know you're scared. I know you don't want to be here. But this is who you are. You can't change that. You have to accept it." Sarah sat in silence for a long moment, trying to make sense of everything. She had never been someone to accept her fate. She had always fought for what she wanted. But this was different. She had no choice but to face it. "And if I don't accept it?" she asked quietly, her voice barely a whisper. Dante's eyes darkened, his expression hardening. "Then you'll never survive here," he said, his tone final. "You'll be nothing more than a pawn. And the Romani don't have time for pawns." The finality of his words sent a chill down Sarah's spine. She was in deeper than she had ever been before. She wasn't just playing a game now. She was part of a world that had no room for mistakes, no room for hesitation. If she was going to survive in this world, she had to adapt. She had to become someone else, someone stronger. "You need to learn the rules of this world, Sarah," Dante continued. "Loyalty is everything. If you fail to protect the family, if you fail to do what is expected of you, there will be consequences. But if you succeed, you will have power. You will have respect." Sarah looked at him, the weight of his words settling into her chest. Power. Respect. That was what this world was about. It wasn't about love or loyalty in the traditional sense. It was about control. It was about survival. And Sarah had to decide if she was willing to play the game. Could she become the woman they wanted her to be? Could she embrace the legacy that was hers, whether she liked it or not? The answer was unclear, but one thing was certain. She couldn't go back to the life she had before. The world she had known, the life she had built for herself, was gone. All that was left now was the Romano family, and the choice she had to make. Would she fight to survive in their world, or would she become another casualty of the game they played? The weight of Dante's words hung in the air like a storm cloud, and Sarah couldn't escape it. She had been thrust into a world she never wanted to be a part of, yet now it was impossible to deny. This was her reality. She was a Romano. She had blood ties to a family whose legacy was built on secrecy, power, and danger. The mansion felt like a prison, every hallway echoing with the choices she would soon have to make. Could she embrace the life Dante wanted for her, or would she try to fight her way out? The question consumed her every waking moment. Dante had already warned her. There was no middle ground. She would either rise to the challenge or be consumed by the game they all played. Over the next few days, Sarah found herself spending more time at the estate. Each conversation with Dante, every encounter with the other members of the Romano family, made her feel like an outsider looking in. They were all so comfortable in this life, moving through it with the confidence of people who had never known anything different. Sarah, on the other hand, felt like a fish out of water, struggling to find her place in a world that had already been carved out for her. But Dante kept reminding her, "You don't have a choice." Every day, Sarah tried to gather more information, tried to understand the world she had been thrown into. She observed the men who worked for Dante, their cold expressions, their silence, their loyalty to the family. It was a world of rules and consequences, where betrayal was punished harshly and survival depended on knowing where you stood. She wasn't just learning how to navigate this world, she was learning how to survive in it. One evening, Dante summoned her to the study again. Sarah had grown used to these meetings, but tonight was different. There was something in his voice, something urgent, that made her stomach twist. "Sit," Dante said, his voice cold and serious. "It's time for you to learn what being a Romano really means." Sarah sat down across from him, her heart pounding. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice shaking slightly. Dante leaned forward, his eyes intense. "I've been watching you, Sarah. You've been trying to fight this life, but you need to understand that the moment you stepped into this family, you became a target. There are people out there who want to see you fail. They want to see this family torn apart, and you're part of that now." Sarah swallowed hard, the reality of his words sinking in. "What are you saying?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dante's gaze hardened. "I'm saying you need to be prepared. There are enemies out there, people who will try to use you against me, against the family. They'll do whatever it takes to weaken us, and you need to be ready for that." Sarah felt a cold sweat break out on her forehead. She had always thought she could hide, that she could stay out of the way. But now, it seemed like that wasn't an option anymore. "What do I have to do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. Dante leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him as he regarded her. "You need to learn how to fight back," he said, his voice hardening. "You need to learn the game, how to play it, how to protect yourself, and how to protect the family." Sarah nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of what he was saying. This wasn't just about surviving in a world of power. It was about defending everything she had just inherited, the legacy, the family, and most of all, herself. "I'm not asking you to become something you're not," Dante continued, his tone softer now. "But you can't afford to be weak. Weakness will get you killed in this world. You need to be strong, smart, and ready for anything." The weight of his words settled on her shoulders. "I'll do what I have to do," she said, the determination in her voice surprising even herself. Dante studied her for a moment before nodding. "Good. I knew you'd come around. You're a Romano, Sarah. You belong to this world. And it's time you started acting like it." Sarah's heart raced as she left the study. The gravity of her decision had finally hit her. She couldn't go back. She couldn't hide anymore. The world Dante had introduced her to was now her world. And if she wanted to survive in it, she had to fight for it. She had to learn how to navigate the dangers, the secrets, the betrayals that came with being a Romano. She wasn't sure if she was ready for it. She wasn't sure if anyone could be. But one thing was clear. The path ahead was going to be more dangerous than anything she had ever imagined. And she was about to walk down it, whether she liked it or not. The weeks that followed were the beginning of Sarah's transformation, but she didn't realize how deep it would go. The weight of Dante's words echoed in her mind every day. "You're a Romano now. You either rise or fall." The pressure of that simple statement weighed on her, pushing her into a life she had never asked for, a life that now demanded her attention, her loyalty, and her strength. The mansion, once a distant, foreign place, now felt like her prison and her battleground. Every corner, every room seemed to remind her of the family she could never escape. Sarah woke early one morning to the sound of a soft knock on her door. She had barely gotten any sleep. The weight of the past few days had drained her. She opened the door to find one of Dante's men standing there. "Dante wants to see you in the office," he said flatly. "No small talk, no pleasantries, just an order." She nodded and followed him through the grand hallways of the estate. Her footsteps echoed off the marble floors as they walked. She could feel the eyes of the family on her now, the way they watched her with a strange mix of expectation and curiosity. Sarah had always been an outsider, but now, she was part of the very thing she had feared the most. As she entered Dante's office, he looked up from his desk, his face as unreadable as ever. "Sit," he commanded, his tone firm, but not unkind. Sarah obeyed, sitting across from him, her hands resting nervously on her lap. She wasn't sure what this meeting would entail, but she knew one thing. It was never something trivial. Dante studied her for a moment before speaking. "I've been watching you, Sarah," he said, his voice measured. "You're learning. But there's more to this world than just following orders." He paused, his gaze narrowing slightly. "I need to know if you're ready to make the hard choices." The air in the room grew thick. Sarah's heart began to race. She had a feeling she knew where this was going. "What kind of choices?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Dante leaned forward, his eyes intense. "In this world, loyalty isn't just about following the rules. It's about making decisions that protect the family, no matter the cost." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Sometimes, that means eliminating threats. People who would destroy what we've built." Sarah felt a cold shiver run down her spine. She had known this world was dangerous, but the reality of it was starting to set in. "You mean killing?" she said quietly. Dante's eyes never left hers. "Yes, if it's necessary. We protect what's ours, and if that means making enemies disappear, then that's what we do." No hesitation. No second-guessing. Sarah swallowed hard, trying to process the weight of his words. She had always been someone who believed in justice, in doing what was right. But in this world, it seemed the rules were different. There was no right or wrong. There was only survival. "You're not asking me to kill someone," she said, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to sound confident. Dante's expression softened, just slightly. "Not yet," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "But I need to know you're capable of making that choice. If it comes down to it, you need to be able to protect this family. You need to be ready to do whatever it takes." The silence that followed felt suffocating. Sarah could feel the weight of his words, the responsibility that came with being part of this world. She had no illusions now. This wasn't just about her accepting her place in the family. It was about her survival. "I don't know if I can do that," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Dante studied her, his gaze hard. "You don't have a choice, Sarah. The moment you accepted this family, you accepted the burden. The choices we make, the lives we take, they all come with a price. But you'll learn to live with it." Sarah's heart felt like it was in her throat. She had wanted to find answers, to understand this world she had been thrust into. But now that she was starting to understand, she wasn't sure she was ready for the cost. Dante stood, his figure looming over her. "You've got a lot to learn, but I believe you'll get there," he said. "We'll start small. You'll learn the basics of handling situations. I'll introduce you to the right people, and we'll see if you have what it takes to be a Romano." Sarah stood as well, her mind spinning. The weight of her reality was settling in. This was her world now, for better or worse. And if she was going to survive in it, she had to change. She had to embrace it, even if it meant losing part of herself in the process. "I'll do what I have to do," she said, her voice more determined than she felt. Dante gave her a small nod. "Good. You're starting to understand." As Sarah left the office, her mind was consumed with what Dante had said. The world she had been thrust into was more dangerous than she ever imagined. And now, there was no turning back. She could either rise to the challenge or become another casualty of the game. The choice was hers. But for the first time, Sarah wasn't sure she had the strength to make it. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Sarah had learned to live with the growing pressure, each day pushing her deeper into the world she could never have imagined. She had accepted Dante's offer, and now, there was no turning back. But despite the uneasy feeling that gnawed at her, there was no denying the pull of the power she felt in this new life. The Romano name was hers, and with it came not just privilege, but danger. Sarah had begun her training under Dante's watchful eye, learning the subtle intricacies of navigating a world dominated by fear, loyalty, and control. At first, it had been overwhelming. Every move, every decision felt like it carried the weight of centuries of family history. She was being molded into someone she didn't recognize, someone who could stand beside the most dangerous people in the world and survive. But as the days passed, Sarah began to feel the weight of it less. She had found her place, and as much as she hated it, it was now who she was. The question of whether she could ever truly embrace it remained, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't the same person who had walked into the Romano estate. One evening, Dante called her into his office. There was a shift in the air when she entered, an intensity she hadn't seen before. His gaze locked onto hers as she took a seat across from him, and the tension in the room was palpable. This time, there was no instruction, no training, just silence. "You've done well so far, Sarah." Dante finally spoke, his voice deep, but there was an edge to it. "But there's one final lesson." Sarah's stomach tightened. She had been expecting this. It was inevitable. "What's the lesson?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady, but failing to mask the anxiety creeping in. Dante's eyes narrowed slightly. "It's time you truly understood the consequences of being a Romano." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She had heard the stories. She had seen what the family was capable of, but she had never been told directly what it meant. Dante stood from his desk and walked toward the window, looking out at the sprawling estate. This world isn't just about survival. It's about loyalty, and loyalty means sacrifice. Sarah watched him, her pulse quickening. She wasn't sure if she was ready for what was coming, but she knew one thing. She couldn't turn away now. "Who do I have to sacrifice?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dante turned slowly to face her. His eyes were cold, calculating, but there was something else there too, something Sarah couldn't quite place. "Your first real test will come soon," he said. "And when it does, you'll have to decide if you're willing to make the hard choice. There are enemies out there, people who want to destroy us. You'll have to decide whether to protect this family, even if it means losing someone close to you." The weight of his words sank in, and for a moment, Sarah felt as though the room was closing in around her. She had been warned, but this was the first time she truly understood the cost of the life she had entered. "I don't know if I can do that," she admitted, her voice shaking. "I don't know if I'm ready to make that kind of choice." Dante studied her for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then, he stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You don't get to choose, Sarah," he said softly. "The moment you stepped into this world, you gave up that right. The world we live in doesn't give us options. It doesn't care about our feelings. It only cares about loyalty, about power, about survival." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She had known, deep down, that this moment would come. But knowing it and facing it were two different things. "What if I refuse?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dante's expression hardened. "Then you're no better than the people who would destroy us," he said, his tone cold. "And you'll have to live with the consequences of that." The finality of his words hit her like a punch to the stomach. There was no easy way out. No clean slate. She couldn't go back to the life she had before. And the life she was being forced into wasn't one she could ever escape. Sarah stood in the dim light of the office, her mind racing. The scar on her neck, the one that had always felt like a reminder of her past, now felt like a brand. She was tied to this world, whether she liked it or not. The choices she made from here on out would define her. The life she had before, the life of normalcy, was gone. She wasn't Sarah the ordinary woman anymore. She was Sarah Romano. And now, she had to make a choice that would change everything. The stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. There was no more room for doubt, no more room for hesitation. It was time to embrace who she was or be swallowed whole by the family's legacy. Dante's eyes watched her, knowing that she was at the crossroads. She was part of the family now. She would either rise or fall, and Sarah wasn't sure which way she would go. But as she stood in front of him, the future stretched out before her, uncertain and filled with darkness. One thing was clear, there was no turning back. In this thrilling dark romance, Sarah is thrust into a world of danger, power, and betrayal when she discovers that she is the daughter of a mafia boss's late wife. As Sarah navigates the dangerous and secretive world of the Romano family, she must learn how to survive, make difficult choices, and embrace the darkness within. The dark romance elements of this story pull Sarah deeper into a legacy she never asked for, as her connection to the powerful and ruthless world of the Mafia becomes undeniable. As she faces tough decisions, Sarah must decide whether to fully embrace her destiny in the dark romance world that is now hers, or risk losing everything. This dark romance story is filled with power struggles, loyalty, and intense emotions, as Sarah fights to find her place within a family built on secrets and danger. The stakes are high in this dark romance tale, where trust, betrayal, and survival are the driving forces of Sarah's journey. Will she rise to power, or will the dark romance world consume her? Find out as Sarah faces her fate in this gripping, unpredictable story of love, loss, and the power of loyalty in a world where darkness reigns.